Okay, the big hand and the little hand are both pointing straight up. It is 12 o'clock and time for the class to begin. So welcome to the Friday edition of Managerial Accounting. Glad you're all here. I'm recording this so that we can post the answers to the homework online. And so people who are out of town on one event or another can at least see what we did today, because I think a few of you already have obligations off campus, at least those of you watching the video do. We've already done in Chapter 1, we've defined managerial accounting, we've identified the three primary responsibilities of management. We've distinguished between financial and managerial accounting, and we've got some questions about that in the homework for today. And we've explained the primary roles and skills required of managerial accountants. So now we're going to go into section 1.4, which is describing the role of the Institute of Management Accountants and the use of ethical standards. And I am violating my own syllabus because I didn't have my phone turned off, but now we do. We've already talked about the Institute of Management Accountants because they are involved in the development and the administration of the CMA, the Certified Management Accountant designation, and they provide that certification, and that's an important certification that many of you will have the opportunity, if you choose to go in that direction, to do to take the exam either after you graduate, or if you follow the advice of Professor McCaig, you can take it between your junior and senior years if you've got enough courses, if you've got the correct courses in order to be able to sit for it. And that would be a very, very plumb credential to have on your resume in applying for jobs and internships and things of that nature. So just consider that and follow up on that if you're interested. Our chapter begins with Google's Code of Ethics and Alphabet Incorporated that we looked at last time, which owns Google and YouTube and many other technologically sophisticated companies, has a motto, "Don't be evil." And perhaps we'll test that motto a little bit as we look through the materials in this unit. Somewhat ironically, I did post a counterbalance to all the self-congratulatory information from Google in the chapter, and that should be in your course materials, although I may not have posted it in both sections. So if I haven't posted it in your section, I will at the end of the class today. But what I found is I went back about, 8 or 9 years to when Larry King was still alive and on television. And I found an interview that he did with the Dr. Robert Epstein. And Dr. Epstein was a professor in the psychology department of Harvard University for a long time. He got his PhD there, and he was the last PhD student who was mentored by B.F. Skinner. Has anybody ever heard of B.F. Skinner? Anybody know? Anybody take a psychology class on behavioral science or personality theory or anything of that nature? Well, the B.F. Skinner is to behavioral psychology as Freud is to psychological therapy and treatment, where you go talk to the shrink and lie on the couch and that sort of thing. B.F. Skinner said, no, really, you can train the human mind to either to cure it or to learn identifiable patterns. And he started with animal behavior, and he used to create these labyrinth-like boxes. And he would train rats to go find the cheese at the end of the other, end of the maze. And when the rat learned the route to the cheese, the rat stopped going, down the wrong paths and stopped going down, all the blind alleys, and eventually, went directly there to where the cheese was. And then when Skinner took the cheese out, what did he find? He found the rats kept going in the prescribed route, even though there was no longer any cheese there. And that's kind of what Google does. And Epstein identified that, and he discusses that in the video interview and in a lot of his work. And he's done a lot of work with respect to Google's influence on political elections, but also Google's influence on shaping the results that you see as a way to, at least in their view, improve society. And one wonders whether Google's definition of good and evil is the same as your definition of good and evil. Perhaps they might have a different view of it in Mountain Brook, California, than they do in Newberry, South Carolina. So anyhow, maybe take a look at that. That's not required, but it is there as a resource just to provide some additional depth to the information on ethics here, particularly using Google as an example. The IMA is perhaps more benevolent than Google, at least in my opinion, and they have 4 standards in their ethical pronouncements: and competence, confidentiality, integrity, and credibility, which of course proves that accountants are lousy marketers. Okay, so I crossed out integrity and put character, and now we have the 4 C's, and perhaps that's how you can remember it. And maybe when you see character, you'll think integrity, and then you'll be able to remember that. It might be on the exam. So then there are some examples of ethical issues, and one of the first ones is the classic ethical issue of a conflict of interest. And they have the example of the company that wants to produce excess inventory despite their falling sales forecasts. Why is that an ethical issue? What is the ethical issue here? Anybody want to take a shot at that? What's the ethical issue involved in this first example with the people who want to continue to produce more inventory even though the sales forecasts are falling? Yeah.
That money could be used for the employees that they're going to end up having to lay off when the sales forecast does indeed follow what it has said.
Well, yeah, I mean, the money could be better used for, I'm not sure about the alternative use, but yeah, I mean, certainly it seems like a waste of money to produce things that you don't expect customers are ever going to buy, right? Who benefits from doing that? Who benefits from producing the excess inventory in that example? If you read the book and, read the examples carefully. Why did they do it? Why did they do it in the example in the book, in this big paragraph here underneath the gray box? Underneath the gray box that says the IMA ethical standards, we have this example. The CEO expressed concern in a meeting over the effect of decreased sales on the bonuses of the upper-level executives. Since the bonus is tied to meeting income projections. And so the vice president of marketing suggested in the meeting, if the company just continues to produce the same number of headsets as they had in the previous year, income levels may still be achieved in order for the bonuses to be awarded, even though their projections were that the customers weren't going to buy those headsets. So what we see, this is a classic example of a conflict of interest. And the C-suite people are making a business decision based on wanting to get their bonus, not based on what objectively would be in the best interest of the company and which would best serve the interest of other stakeholders like their shareholders and their creditors. Okay, so this is the example of a conflict of interest, and it's the classic ethical issue. It's or one of the classic ethical issues. I mean, people walking out the back door with stuff is another one, but short of stealing, conflicts of interest are probably the most important ethical issue that you're going to get to in business. So that's a case of people putting the business at risk of taking a substantial loss because they wanted to get their bonuses. Maybe if it were accompanied by something that would solve the problem, maybe let's do an advertising campaign, okay, and try to keep the sales up, or perhaps let's try to re-engineer the product so that it sells better vis-a-vis our competitors. You might be able to solve the ethical issue and also benefit yourself and align the interests of the executives, with the interests of the other stakeholders. So sometimes there are, clever and creative ways and ethical ways to solve a conflict of interest, but that's not what happened in this particular case. Okay. Also, you have the example of, this certainly happens in government a lot, use it or lose it, where, your next year's budget is based on how much you spent this year. So if you don't spend the whole budget on education and training, you're not going to get as much to spend next year. And so a lot of times people are scrambling to come up with creative ways to spend money that they really don't have to spend. And in this example, what they did is they just spent a lot of money on training sessions that they already knew the answers, to the material. So it didn't really teach them anything, but it spent the budget so they'd have the same budget rolling into the next year, or maybe even a slightly higher budget. If we're talking about the federal government, you're going to have, your baseline is going to be increased by inflation and everything else. So it's just going to go up and up and up. And we have those issues too as accountants. I mean, when you have professional designations, oftentimes there are continuing education requirements to meet. As a North Carolina CPA, I'm required to get 40 hours a year of continuing education, and that's a whole work week. So 1/50th, if I have 2 weeks of vacation, or 1/48th if I have 4 weeks of vacation of my year is spent on continuing education, and that's a cost I have to bear, and that's time that I don't get to charge to my clients if I'm, in an accounting firm. And so that's a lot of times people will try to, take continuing education courses like the people did in this example in your book, where they just take stuff that they already know, where maybe it's an 8-hour course and they know that they can just sit down and do the exam in 15 minutes or a half an hour and get their 8 hours of credit for that. So that's another example of some of the slippery slopes that you get into with ethical decisions. Now, if you follow the link to Google's code of conduct, you can see a lot of really good things in here with respect to Google's code of conduct. And there's a lot of, this would be an excellent, set of ethical rules for just about any company. It's got, first of all, it's got material on it for, what happens if you've got an issue with, something that's going on at the company. You don't have to go through channels to your immediate supervisor. You've got the ability to go directly to the top. In fact, at Google, you can go straight to the audit committee of the board of directors, as a whistleblower. They have an anti-retaliation policy, and they also, they talk about serving the users of their service, and Google is an online service. Their support and respect for each other and what their standards are there. And a lot of the same things that you'll see, here at Newberry in terms of, the codes of ethics and honorable behavior and respect for each other, you see in the big bad world outside of academia as well. Once you graduate, you're in a company like Google, and I think pretty much all public companies have these standards, and it's a pretty good code of conduct, and there's nothing in here about secretly manipulating the users. But anyhow, if you take a look at the Robert Epstein video, you can see how he's determined that they're doing that. And if you look him up on Wikipedia, you'll find that even in the years since then, he's done even more work. And he's watching Google constantly. He's probably Google's worst nightmare. But anyhow, he's able to identify how they're shading their search results in some cases. And what he said, and actually, if you listen to what Robert Epstein said, is that when Google knows that you're watching them, it doesn't shade the results anymore. So, in other words, it's kind of like it's an external control, but it's something that is improving their behavior, or at least this is what he argues, is he's improving Google's behavior as a company because he identifies, when they put their thumb on the scale. So, okay, and the same's probably true for Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all the other major kind of social network companies and online search engines. The example that he gave, I think, to Larry King was that if you type in, Donald Trump used to call his opponent Crooked Hillary, and if you typed in Crooked Hill, you didn't even see Crooked Hillary, notwithstanding all the chatter about that on the internet, in the search results. And if you typed in Crooked Hill A, you didn't see any results. And if you typed in Crooked Hill R, without the Y on the end, you didn't see any search results. You had to type in the whole phrase before you got any search results about that term. And, it's perhaps what they're doing is not intending to influence an election in that way. Perhaps what they're doing, is that's an insulting thing for, a celebrity or political candidate, and maybe they're just deciding not to get involved in that sort of name calling, or at least not to be supporting that practice. And if you try to enter the names of Orange Man Bad and stuff like that Trump's been called, you don't get any results from that either until you type in the whole phrase. So anyhow, so I guess it's even-handed, and it happens on DuckDuckGo too. I use Firefox and DuckDuckGo, and you don't get results until you type in the whole phrase on those search engines either. So anyhow, okay, that's page 1 on the lesson plan. Okay, then we get to the ethics legislation, Sarbanes-Oxley. There's a good little, let me see here if I still have that. I do. Okay, so some of your links for Sarbanes-Oxley, I know the first one from Accounting Today is dead, so if you try to follow that, the one from Connect Us works, but it's a little basic. This is a pretty good video explaining Sarbanes-Oxley and its requirements, and I think I'm going to let the video do the work as opposed to me talking about it. But let me turn off the sound first, just in case we get the commercial first. Oh no, we're live. Okay.
The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 is a legislative response to a number of corporate scandals that sent shockwaves through the world financial markets. Some of the biggest issues involved Enron, Tyco, and WorldCom. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, commonly referred to as SOX, attempts to strengthen corporate oversight and improve internal corporate control. The main purpose of SOX is to protect shareholders from fraudulent representations in corporate financial statements. Investors need to know that the financial information they rely on is truthful and that an independent third party has verified its accuracy. SOX is a long and complicated law, but it has a few key provisions. Section 302 requires that corporate management certify that they have reviewed the financial statements and that they are accurate and truthful. Section 401 requires that financial information include disclosures about any relevant off-balance sheet obligations that may exist. Section 404 requires management to state whether or not the company's internal control procedures are adequate and effective. Section 404 has costly implications for publicly traded companies, as it is expensive to establish and maintain the required internal controls. Section 409 requires management to update the public of significant financial matters when they happen, rather than wait until the quarterly or annual report. Section 802 imposes penalties for violations of the SOX rules, which can include fines or even jail time.
In fact, the jail time now is up. It's not like your typical, federal 5 or 10 years. It's 25 years, up to 25 years for violation of intentional violation of Sarbanes-Oxley. I think, for those of you watching this video or those of you at home, if you just go to Investopedia and type in a topic, a lot of times you find something, this good that concisely explains and illustrates the topic. The annual internal control audit that's now required to accompany the annual financial statements is very expensive, very expensive. And if you have a reporting company that pays, maybe $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 for an audit, with one of the big accounting firms, and then they have to do an internal control audit as well, that might double the cost of the financial statement and the annual compliance work that needs to be done to produce that annual report. So Section 404, the internal control audit, is very expensive, and the compliance costs for public companies now are getting to the point that many companies are thinking about going private just to save those kind of compliance costs and not have to prepare, all the reporting that's required for a public company and do all that, get all that accounting work done. Of course, it's great for the big accounting firms, the ones that can handle, the Big Four and BDO and some of the others that do those audits. So. As I said, the Connect Us link works. The Accounting Today link in Section 1.4 sadly is dead. Then you get into the 8 steps for analyzing a ethical issue. And that's right here, right before you get to the ethical dilemma that asks you to illustrate that. So why don't we try to answer? Let me see who's here. This is the most unusual class. It's almost like it was created alphabetically because it starts with lots of people with names A, B, and C. That's about half the class. And nobody has a last name after the letter P. So we have no Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z names in the whole class. But anyhow, let's start with Sean Price. Sean, there's an ethical dilemma here. Now, who is Sean Price? Oh, there you go. So, Mr. Price, there's an ethical dilemma. You're about to sign a new client to a very large contract worth over $900,000, Your supervisor is under a lot of pressure to increase sales. He calls you into his office and he tells you his future with the company is in jeopardy. And he asks you to include the revenue for the new contract in the sales figure for the quarter that ends today. Now, does that sound like a proper request? No. Have you taken financial accounting? Did you take introduction to financial accounting? You did? Okay. Did you study revenue recognition? Okay. All right. Well, let me just remind everybody in the class, not just Mr. Price, that this is not a proper revenue recognition that you're being asked to perform. Okay. If you have an unsigned contract, you can't record the revenue. There's several additional steps that need to be performed in order to properly recognize that revenue. So, the contract is a certainty, but the client's out of town and cannot possibly sign for at least a week. And this prompt asks us, use the 8 steps in examining an ethical situation to determine how you would react to the situation. And the 8 steps are right above the little gray box. And the first one is recognize the ethical issue at hand and those involved. So look at it from the perspective of the different stakeholders, the employees, the creditors, the vendors, and the community at large. So what's the ethical issue at hand, and how does it involve the employees of the company? Well, we know how it affects the supervisor, right? The supervisor might lose, his or her job if the revenue is not recognized, because obviously this department or this company, hasn't performed as it was expected to. How about the creditors? If you report the $900,000 and the creditor sees the financial statement, what's the creditor going to think? Well, the creditor is going to see the $900,000 and think the company's doing better than it really is, right? So it's going to be misled. The creditor is one of our main users of the financial statements, and so, if you tell the creditor you got $900,000 more in revenue than you really have, you're defrauding them, right? So that's a pretty serious thing. And the vendors are also people who, supply the company and sometimes advance credit, in terms of shipping before being paid. And so they're in kind of the same boat too. So, in the short run, it might make the supervisor happy, but in the long run, when it's discovered, and it's always discovered, it's gonna turn out to be bad in the end. Now, I had a couple of interesting observations with the person I talked about this with in the first section. How does this affect you as the employee being asked to do this? What are some of your alternatives? What are your alternative courses of action, and how could they affect you? So think of maybe 3 alternatives. What are the 3 things you could do here? Yeah, solve the problem, right? Right. I mean, if you can get the contract signed, and perhaps signing the contract in this business is enough to recognize the revenue, or perhaps signing the contract and ordering whatever's needed to satisfy the contract, might be something that, but it might take some extra steps too to fix the problem. But maybe you could hurry up and get it done by the end of the quarter, get it done by the end of the period, and you'll be okay with that. So that's a win-win solution, right? That's an ethical way to solve the problem. What if you just do what he asks you to do? what's your interest? What's your interest in that?
I mean, more than likely, if it's just one person doing it, it may not get done by the time the supervisor needs it.
Yeah.
One, it's gonna look bad on the supervisor, and two, it's gonna look bad on yourself for not being able to get it done, and also
Yeah.
the supervisor for not informing you sooner or
Yeah.
giving you more time to do it.
Yeah. What if you just fail to do it? What if you just say, "Psh, I'm not going to do that? What then?
More than likely, you'll get fired, and the supervisor might
Yeah.
dismiss you.
Right, you might get fired for not doing something that really would be an unethical or and possibly illegal act. So that might anything else you might think about doing? Anything you might think about? Who else might you ask about this course of conduct? Remember, Google gave they gave the address of the audit committee of the board of directors to all their employees. Right? So you might think about maybe blowing the whistle on this and saying, look, this guy's asking me to do something improper. You take it up to the top level or to at least a high enough level that you've got somebody who's not in the same boat with the supervisor, or at least, not pulling in the same direction. And, maybe this is what we learned this in the first section. The student said, well, I'd definitely go tell my boss, and then he'd fire the supervisor and I'd get his job. So that might work. That might be a win-win solution also. But if you do this, and if you're known, and if you're found out, and particularly the other stakeholders, people in the community generally, I think about how Volkswagen jimmied the computer system with their exhaust, for the catalytic converter, so that or not catalytic converters, or whatever the thing is that filtered their diesel engines. And when they got found out, as they did, it cost them a lot more in the long run than it would have cost them, just to improve the performance of the exhaust mechanism, so it really was as clean as the computer inside the car would tell the testing, program that it was cleaner than it really was. So that's a situation where it really backfired on Volkswagen, and the same thing could happen here with this little company. If they get to be known as cheaters, people aren't going to believe them in the future. It's like, there's so many examples on the news these days, of people who've, they've lied so many times, you just don't know, what, anything they say, you really have to take it with a grain of salt. So, anyhow, okay, well, that's probably enough for that section. There's some material about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was before Sarbanes-Oxley, and some people call it SOX, some people call it SAROX too, so just understand that. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was back in 1977 after Watergate. And Watergate was such a huge scandal, and they learned during Watergate that there was this fellow named Maurice Stans, and he controlled the Nixon slush fund that was used to pay the White House burglars, who were these former intelligence officers who were hired off the books with the slush fund money of $500,000 that Maurice Stans controlled to go sneak into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate, the office building next to the hotel, and to plant a bug on the chairman of the DNC's phone, and they got caught by a security guard when they were coming back to remove the bug so it wouldn't be found. And as they investigated this whole scheme that they had in the Nixon administration to bug the DNC, what they found is that Maurice Stans was raising all this money from corporations, from major corporations were contributing to this off the books, and they were contributing in cash and in other types of payments that couldn't be traced. And so the foreign corrupt, and they also learned that a lot of these companies were also operating overseas and paying a bunch of bribes to do business in different countries. So they passed the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in order to try to eliminate that by requiring public companies to install systems of internal controls in their companies. So this is really where the major push for internal control started, and then it was expanded and even more seriously enacted by Sarbanes-Oxley. My first job when I was in business school and my summer job with First Union Bank was to work on a project to demonstrate that First Union, the predecessor to Wells Fargo, was in compliance with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And I had to design internal control questionnaires for several of the, for the teller line, for the trust department, for the tax office and things like that to answer questions about whether or not we had proper internal controls in place. And that was my experience with that. I also know that Maurice Stans from Watergate fame eventually retired down to South Carolina. And he was a big game hunter and had all these taxidermy, all these stuffed animals from Africa and around the world, all these exotic animals, which are now on display in the Museum of York County up in Rock Hill. As well as they not only have Maurice Stans' stuffed animals, they also have, does anybody eat Rice Krispies? There was a guy named Vernon Grant who was an artist and illustrator and cartoonist. He invented Snap, Crackle, and Pop for Kellogg's, and all of his drawings are collected there at the Museum of York County, just right up the road. So, anyhow, the idea that $500,000 would be a slush fund really indicates that things have changed in politics. All the dark money in politics now is just really amazing. The level of it. But anyhow, that's probably enough for section 1.5, 1.4. Let's go on to section 1.5. This talks about trends in today's business environment, and the problem with having trends in a textbook is, as soon as you write it and it's published, it's obsolete. So this was probably written 4 or 5 years ago, and one of their important, trends is the importance of service businesses. It's 60% of all U.S. workers now are involved in service entities, and that, providing intangible benefits as opposed to manufacturing and merchandising that deal in tangible goods that you can see and touch. And the the example they give of two companies that are in a customer relationship that are different in this way are Boeing, which makes airplanes, and Delta, which uses airplanes. And Boeing is a manufacturer, Delta is a service business, and Delta buys airplanes from Boeing and also from Airbus and that sort of thing. But that's that's an example of both. There are different accounting issues for manufacturers, merchandisers, and service businesses. There are different tools and techniques we use for those different types of businesses, but all of them need managerial accounting. All of them are benefited by the tools and techniques that we use. Okay, then there's a technology trend, and I just wanted to point out that this enterprise resource planning (ERP), this is something that brings together those teams to try to improve quality within an organization, or perhaps to develop a new product, or perhaps to just make things a little more efficient. Sorry, I just have terrible allergies today. So, ERP streamlines businesses and allows coordination across departments, and it pulls the team together. And I'd like you to contrast this sort of an organization with the organization that you saw in your quiz. Okay, that organization was a hierarchical organization, sort of top down. This is really more of a team around a conference room table, and it's something that actually makes businesses, quicker and more efficient and able to deal with rapid change when they have all the different people with their different skills and talents and experiences sitting around the table together. And it doesn't have to be a table. It's probably a Zoom call or a Teams meeting now. Then there's outsourcing. We're going to learn how to outsource as we go through the semester. And then they talk about all this other stuff like, radio frequency identification. I'm not sure that's really much of a current trend anymore. But they do talk about these other, technological advances. And right up the street from here is a company up in Carlisle. In Carlisle, they shut down. Carlisle's probably a perfect example of what the book talks about. Okay, they shut down the textile mill that produced really high quality ladies' clothing, and they have Daifuku, which what Daifuku does is they make materials handling equipment and systems that make dark warehouses possible. You actually can have warehouses where everything is computerized, run. You don't even have to have the employees in there, picking stuff off the shelf. They make all sorts of production line optimization where things can go down the production line, even more technologically advanced than Ford showed in their little 100-second video, and put the products together without really any human interaction. And they're one of the leading companies in the world. They're out of Tokyo, but they have a lot of American locations, and their Carlisle forging plant is an example of that. They're one of the world's leading materials handling automators, and quite technologically sophisticated. Just right, maybe 20 miles up the road. Okay, so we had homework for today. Sorry, we got 7 minutes left. I thought in your homework, the following students did a really exceptional job, and nobody after the letter Q in the list. So up at the top, Mr. Avalos, your answers could have been the answer key, and Mackay Camber also did an excellent job. Zachary Carabo, Nicholas Colorado, Holly Davies, Kensley Minnick, and Robin Noren. So those really outstanding job on the homework. If if we go to, let's see how I get into this again. I guess I should go to the assignment. Of course, Wolfton's kicked me out again. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm running out of time. I may have to add to this video to get to all the homework. But let's see here. Homework Unit 1. Edit the assignment so I can look at it. Instructions and files. Okay, 1, 2, 5, 6, 10, and 11. Okay, I can remember that. So they were all in exercise set A. Fortunately, this semester, everybody did the correct exercise set. We had some people who were working in exercise B last semester. How about the Mr. Avalos? How about giving us the answers to the first question? So the information indicate whether it's financial accounting or managerial accounting. And A is the information is directed at external users who are making decisions pertaining to investing, extending credit, and other decisions. Is that financial or managerial? Financial, okay. How about the principal users of the organization's managers?
That's not managerial.
Okay, the key focus is on the entity as a whole.
Managerial.
Okay, I think there's a split of authority on that. I think it's kind of a dumb question because I think the key focus probably in all companies should be on the entity as the whole, regardless of whether it's managerial or financial accounting. But what the book suggests is that the answer is financial, okay? But I didn't mark anything wrong for saying managerial. I think you can make the case that the focus on the entity as a whole is key for both of them. But managerial accounting oftentimes looks at smaller business units. A lot of times managerial accounting is done on just one particular area of the company and doesn't produce a financial report for the whole thing. Okay, so that's what the book means. Okay, the rules and principles are very flexible.
Managerial.
And the information gathered is usually available after an independent audit has been completed.
Financial.
Okay, very good. Let's see, Mackay Camber, can you take the second question?
Yep.
Okay, so identify true or false. Managerial accounting reports must comply with the rules set in place by FASB. That's false. Financial accounting reports are typically general purpose reports. True. And I'm going to ask you to answer in a voice that's loud enough that people watching the video will be able to hear you, even though you're way over there and my microphone is way over here. Okay, C. Financial accounting reports pertain to the entity as a whole, whereas managerial accounting focuses more on the subunits of the organization.
True.
See, this is Mr. Avalos. This is what that was their point. Okay. The main users of financial accounting information are the internal users. False. It's the external users, right. Managerial reports are prepared on an as-needed basis.
True.
And financial accounting reports often must be audited at least annually by an independent auditor.
True.
True. Okay, very good. We know the difference between financial and managerial accounting. Okay, so let's see, Zachary Carabo. Can you take us through question 5? And the Taylor Speedy has prepared the following list of statements about managerial accounting, financial accounting, and the function of management. Identify each statement as true or false. So financial accounting centers on providing information to internal users. Is this number 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, number 5. Yeah.
False.
False. Okay. Staff positions are directly involved in the company's primary revenue generating activities. That's false. Preparation of budgets is part of financial accounting.
False.
Right. managerial. Managerial accounting applies only to merchandising and manufacturing companies. Also, it could be services too. And both managerial accounting and financial accounting deal with many of the same economic events. True. Okay. Very good. 5 for 5. How about number 6? Who wants to do number 6? Is kind of complicated, but let's give it to somebody. Mr. Colorado. Did they name the whole state for you? Did they name the entire state for you? Maybe. Okay. All right. I mean, you know, having the name of a state is that's a pretty cool thing. That's
Pretty ironic considering
You've never been to Colorado? Well, my son lives in Colorado, and he lives in Park County, which is where the South Park cartoon comes from. He's at 9,600 feet. Denver is the mile-high city, and Bailey, Colorado is the 2-mile-high city. Okay. Why don't you take us through number 6, please? Certified public accountant. What is that?
That's number 2, considered the top tier in accounting certifications, must pass a 4-part exam, educational work experience required.
Okay. And let's do chartered financial analyst.
That would go with number 5, certification for those with career in finance and investment areas.
Yep. Okay. And with that, have we reached our time? Oh, no, we've got the 5 extra minutes. That's right. We've got 5 extra minutes. Great. Okay. Let's do C.
C would go with number 1, specialist in corporate accounting management, favors financial analytics, budgeting, and strategic domains.
That's right. And it really is. I mean, it is really a top, I don't know that it's as rigorous as the CFA, but you really have to know your stuff in terms of data analytics to be a CMA. So it's a great calling card for somebody who wants to go be the accounting right-hand person, to some very successful entrepreneur. If you're a CMA, nobody on Shark Tank's going to stump you. Okay, if you go on Shark Tank and those guys, Kevin and them, are asking you to, what's your profit margin, what's your break even, what's your, none of that stuff is going to stump you. Okay. Certified internal auditor. How about that?
That's number 4, credential for auditors who work within organizations and one of 2 that is acceptable abroad.
Okay. How about certified fraud examiner?
Number 6, designation that proves proficiency in fraud prevention, detection, and deterrence.
Yep. And that's a really fun thing to do. For those of you who like to watch, murder mysteries and things like that, and, stories about true crime, certified fraud examiner is a pretty cool profession to be in, because you can learn the statistical tricks, where you can detect fraud, even when it's not visible, when it's not, when it's latent instead of patent, in the financial information. Okay, and how about the certified government auditing professional? Okay, so there you go. So public sector auditors, the certified government auditing professional. And with that, we are going to have to leave questions 10 and 11 for the video, or perhaps I'll just post the answers to that. Obviously, you can click on the links and find the definitions, so no one should have gotten number 11 wrong, but in any event, have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. We'll have your assignments posted by the end of the day for Unit 2 and probably Unit 3 also. If anybody missed the sign-in sheet, please come sign in. So.
That quiz is due. I think you guys said it's due at 5 today, right?
The quiz?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
due today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The quiz was probably due earlier, but I think I allowed it to be submitted later. Yeah. So today's the 3rd. Let me go look at that for just a second. Let me get off the big screen. But, let's see what we have here as far as the time on the quiz. Back to the main screen. introductory quiz.
Yeah.
Looks like the quiz was, looks like it's closed, but let me see. You are
Donovan.
Donovan. Oh, I'm in the wrong section. Hang on. Oh, this is where I posted it twice. Let's see here. Donovan Ford. Maybe you did it in the other one.
I'm pretty sure I probably took the other one. Yeah, I took. All right. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
other
you
one,
did just fine. You did
all right,
very
so
well.
That quiz don't. It's not the one that you just.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to transfer the grades so that we just have it in one assignment, regardless of which one you did it in, and then I'll update the grade book and take out the zeros for the ones you didn't take.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
How's your neighbor?
How are you doing?
Good, are you?
Good. What's going on?
Just gonna ask first off about homework because I didn't do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And second, the fraud examiner kind of interested me. So,
Oh, okay. You are Listerman?
Listen. Yep.
Listerman. Okay. Well, your homework is actually still open,
Okay.
so you can still submit your homework.
All right.
But just get it in by midnight tonight, okay?
Okay.
Can you do that? And
I-
we've
I
gone
just-
through it, so it ought to be pretty easy. But the key is for you just to do it. The key isn't for you to get the right answers on the homework. The homework's free, okay?
Yeah.
That's a free 10 points. So
Okay.
just do all the assignments, hand them in, do your best work. Let me see that you put an effort into it. I mean, it should take maybe a half an hour.
It got drowned because you know what happened? My
What?
online classes started. So for some reason they decided to have like 5 to 7 assignments on my calendar. So it drowns out all my other stuff. And so it's like I think it was the macroeconomics. So I got like 5 or 6 assignments on one day because it's just opening.
Wow. So you're
It-
taking macroeconomics and this class?
Yeah, and micro.
Micro. Oh,
I've
micro.
already taken micro. Because you have to.
Yeah, right.
But,
You have to take microeconomics.
Yeah.
Microeconomics is the best economics course you're ever going to take.
Personal finance is pretty nice.
I didn't have an option of taking personal finance when I was, I guess, coming along. But who teaches personal finance?
I don't know. I'm talking about like my high school.
Oh, got
So
it. Okay.
I had
Okay.
like a high school class that taught me like the majority of like the value of money type stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Which was
Yeah.
later on they actually made it a graduation requirement. And it
Really?
was actually nice
Yeah.
because it was like I already had done it, so it was like I'm chilling, but everyone else had to like go and take the class. They weren't super into it, but I took the class intentionally because I wanted to know how to like manage my own money and stuff like that. So
Well, that's really smart, and that's something that if you get in that habit now. I mean, I think they should require, certainly, personal finance should be a required course, for anybody who's an athlete here. I mean, if you're going to go into athletics, you need to learn how to manage your money.
I
And
think everyone in general would, because the amount of people that I've met who just like blow money on stuff, the highest cost stuff that I have right now are my phone bill and